Hi, my name is Jon Peltier, and I'm going to talk to you about cheating with charts. I started with Excel a long time ago. I actually used it the first time on a Macintosh, Excel version 1.0, but my poor Mac didn't have enough RAM to run it properly, so I didn't really get started with Excel until a couple years later, back in the mid 90s. And I started out not as a finance people like many Excel users, but as a research scientist. And after several years of that, like all people in my field, I got laid off. And rather than look for another dead-end job in another dead-end research department, I hung out my shingle, formed Peltier Technical Services, and started doing projects for people, and included in the projects are things like these training sessions. I've been a Microsoft Excel MVP since 2001. Peltier Technical Services I founded in 2004, and I've been doing this stuff ever since. Okay, cheating with charts. Very often you want to get a certain appearance in your chart. You want to show certain labels, or you want to show, lines where, you need a line for some reason. And it's not always apparent how you get it. The cheating part of this is, how do you play games with your data, or maybe you add something to your chart and format it a certain way to get what you want. And that's what I'll be talking about, is different ways of making Excel charts look the way you want. So the first thing I'm going to show, this is a stacked column chart. You're all familiar with them. You've all made far too many of them. And you see each of the little blocks in the stack has a label on it to show what the quantity is. But you don't have a way of adding labels to the top of that bar, because that bar already has its own labels. And what you want to do is show what the total of each stack is. And that's pretty easy to do, actually. You see, I already have my totals calculated in the worksheet next to the range that the chart is plotting. So what I'm going to do is add a series to the chart, and then hide it, and then add data labels. So in order to add that series, that's pretty easy to do. I could go through the edit data dialog, but that's a pain in the neck. What I'm going to do is, you see the highlights that when you select the chart, there's some colored highlights that show what data is in the chart. And I'm just going to grab the corner and drag it over to include the total. And you see, now I have this brand new yellow series on top of everything. That's my total. And I could sort of keep that, but that's not exactly what I want. It makes the chart axis expand, because now the stack is twice as tall as it would have been, because I'm stacking the total on top of the individual components. So what I'm going to do is change the chart type of the added series. So I right click on that, and I look down here, it says change series chart type. And that pops up a dialog that says change chart type. And what I'll do, you see it lists each of the series in the chart, and it tells you what type of series it is. And you see they're all stacked column. Well, I'm going to click on the little drop down over here, and up pops this nice little thing. I can select line chart instead of stacked column, and you can get a hint in the preview here what's happening. I'll say OK, and now I have a data point on my line chart at the top of the stack. And so I just need to format the labels, because they're not in the right position. So anytime you select an object in Excel and press Control-1, and that includes any element of a chart, it brings up the format dialog, or the format task pane for that item. So here we have the format data labels dialog task pane, and I'm going to select the above position for the labels. That looks great. And then I'm just going to hide my series here. The format dialog is already up. I select series, and it says format data series. I'm going to click on the paint can, change the line color to no line, and I'm almost done. The only thing that's left is there's this extraneous legend entry for total. So what I'll do is I'll click once to select the legend, and I'll click again to select the legend entry that says total. It's not a double click, it's two single clicks. And now that that's selected, I'll press delete, And now we're done, and that's perfect. In this workbook, there's a couple of sheets for each example. One of them is the example that needs me to work on, and then the other one shows it all done so you can look at it and try to reverse engineer it. Here's another example. I have some data here, and I want to show a target range. And you can see from my table that the target range should go from a minimum of 0.15 down here to a maximum of 0.55 up here. So what I want to do is put a colored band in that range so I can tell when my data points are within my target range. So what I'm going to use for that is, again, some more series that I'm going to put in the chart. I'm going to hide one and format the other. What I will do is put a series, they will be stacked columns. So one column will be at the bottom edge and one will be at the top edge and filled in. So the first thing I need to do, I can't use min and max, because if I use max, it's going to make the top end too high. What I need to do is insert a column. That's easy enough to do. Right click on the column header, insert, and I'm going to type in here the word target, because that's what I want the legend to say. And then in the column in between, what I want to do is show the difference between max and min. So I'm just going to write a simple formula equals this cell minus that cell, and then Control Enter to fill it into the whole range. And now what I want to chart is min and target on top of the chart here that shows actual. So I select my chart, and just like I did with the previous example, I'm going to grab the bottom corner of my highlighted range and drag it across to add min and target to my chart. And there we see min and target. And of course, target is too low, but remember, it will be stacked on top of the min, and so it'll be up in this appropriate range. So select any of the series in the chart. You don't necessarily have to select the series you're going to change, because you get the list of all the series. So we change series chart type, and I see actual is line with markers. That's good. Min, I want to be stacked column. That's this button. And target, I also want to be stacked column, and I'll click that. And you see from the preview, yeah, that looks like it's getting me where I want to go, and I'll say okay. And then first thing I want to do is, while I need to format these series, I don't want gaps in between these bars. I want it to be a continuous band. So what I have to do is, in the Format Data Series task pane, click on the series options icon, and where it says gap width, that's the width of the gap between bars, and I want that width of the gap to be 0%. And so I'll type in 0, and there's our solid bars. And now the minimum series on the bottom, which is orange, I want that to be totally transparent. So I'm going to format that to have no fill. And then the target, we can keep it gray, but what I like to use is a lighter color gray. And the way I like to make it lighter color is, well, first I'll pick the color again, but then I'll give it a certain transparency. So let's try 50% and see how that looks. 50%, that looks pretty good. And the nice thing about using a transparency, I had grid lines across my chart, and the grid lines still show through the transparent band there. Last thing I need to do is clean up my legend. I have I don't want to show min, I just want to show actual and target. So what I do, as before, I click once to select the legend, click again to select the min entry, and then delete. And there we go, another perfect chart. And then here's the example worked out. One thing that makes charts easier to read, you see here I have two different series. I'm showing budget versus actual, and I have a legend over here, and I can go back and forth between the legend and the chart to make sense out of which is which. But you see there's a problem here. First of all, the legend is removed a short distance from the data, so I have to keep moving my eyes back and forth to read it. The other thing is the lines cross, and over near where the legend is, budget is actually a lower value than actual, but in the legend they're showing in the reverse order. So the legend can be a little bit tricky. So what I'm going to do, I'm not going to use a legend. I'm going to get rid of my legend. And then what I'll do is I'll add data labels to the last point in each series. So I'll click once to select the series, and then once more to select just the point. And now I'll right click on that, and it will be add data label, and I'll click that. And there's a data label. The default data label shows me the value, not the name of the series, but we'll fix that later. It's very easy to fix. Now we'll do the same thing here. Single click to select the series, single click to select the point, right click, add data label. And now what I'm going to do is I'll select one of the data labels, and actually right here I'm selecting not just the one data label, but all the data labels in the whole series. So you have to, the same ways to select, and of course the rest of them don't have data labels because I didn't add them, but Excel still thinks of it as a whole series first. So you have to click on it again to select the individual label. And over in label options, again, click on the label options icon. And what we want to show is the series name, and we don't want to show the value. And I'm going to get rid of the leader lines because I don't want them to happen accidentally when I don't expect them. And then I'll do the same thing with the other label. So I have to click once to select all the labels, even though there's just one visible, and then click again to select the one. And now check series, uncheck value, uncheck leader lines. Not done yet, but we're getting there. We need to shrink the width of the plot area a little bit. The plot area is the internal box that I'm manipulating right now, the one that contains the data and has the axes on the edges. Now, one or two more things to help this. What I'm going to do is make those data labels bold so they show up a little better. Probably I could use a larger font size. And then I'm going to match the color of the label font to the color of the series. And that just makes it so easy for somebody to read your chart. And there you go. There's my properly labeled chart. And that's great. But a lot of times when you have budget versus actual, your budget, shows the whole year, so you can stick budget at the end here. But what if you only have, 4 months of actual data? You put a data label on that, and then you add more data. Well, your label stays back where it was, and your data continues on, and it's not very clear. But there's a trick you can use to make the data label dynamic. So what I'm going to do, and this says static labels, which is wrong. It's supposed to be dynamic labels. So here's the data I have, and you see I only have a few months of actual, but I have the whole year of budget. But what I'm going to do is put a formula in this next set of cells here that will give me a point only where I want to have a data label, and it's going to be the last cell in each column that has a value, which means the cell after it has no value. So what I am going to do is use a formula here. I'm going to type equals if and I need to test on two conditions, so I'll use A and D, and if this cell is not equal to double quote, and if the cell below it is equal to the double quote. If that is true, then I'm going to show the value in that cell. If it's not true, I'm going to use NA with the open close parentheses afterwards. What that does is if it's not true, then it'll just give me the pound NA, the hash NA error in those cells, which in a line chart or an XY chart, it doesn't draw a point there. So now I'm going to do Control Enter to enter that formula into all the cells, and you see, oh, that's right, I have a value for actual that lines up with the last value in the actual column, and I have one for budget, which lines up in the last row of the budget column. And now what I need to do is I'm not going to label the existing series at all. What I'm going to do is add the other budget and actual series to my chart, and I'll do that again by dragging the highlight over to add series to the chart. Now it's hard to see on the chart, but if you look, there's a yellow point at the end of the actual series that doesn't quite match the orange of all of them, and there's a gray one here that doesn't match all the blue ones. And those two series are the ones that I added here that only have 1 point each. So what I'll do first of all is I'll add data labels to those points. Now, unlike the previous example where I added the label only to the last point, I'm going to add the label to the whole series. So I'm going to, now another way to add labels is with our little plus icon over here. So I'll just check the data label thing. Now you notice it wants to put the label above the point, and I want it to the right of the point. So I'm just going to select right, and there's my label. And again, it shows the value, not the series name, but you already know how to fix that. And then I'm going to do the same thing with my false budget series, and I'll say right, and then I will select the label here, and click on that icon, do series name, and undo value, and undo leader lines, and I'll do the same thing with my other one. And now let's make it bold. Let's make that one bold. Let's give it the right color. Let's give this one the right color. And there we are. All we got to do now is hide those discolored points. And I'm just going to do that by formatting, clicking on the marker thing, and under marker options, I'm going to say none. And I'm going to do the same thing for budget. I'm going to say under marker options, none. And now we don't even need the legend anymore because we've labeled our points. So let me just delete the legend. And now we can stretch that to make room for the data. And what I meant to show is that when I add data here, let's say the next month is down to 2000, you see the label moves along with the last point, and go to 2000, and then 2250, it goes up, and the label just keeps moving with the point. Very nicely done. Another point, a lot of times you have labels that you want to put in your chart, and okay, chart title, I want to put a specific title here. I'll say, I don't know what to say. So you go and you type something in there, but that's a static thing, and the legend, the label, you have to go in and type it if you want to change it. But there's a way to link a title, a chart title, an axis title, a data label, even a shape in your chart, to link it to a cell in your worksheet so that you can construct some text and just link to that. And when the text updates in the worksheet, it updates in the chart very easily. So the way to do that is quite easy. Like all links in Excel, it works with an equal sign. So I'll select the text element I want to link, which is the chart title there, and I'll type an equal sign, and then I'll click on the cell I want to link to. Click, enter, my chart title here. You see how easy that was? And if I change that text in the cell, I can say new title here, and I hit enter, and there it goes. So now I can have any formula up in that cell. Maybe you want to append the date to the to the title. You would just say something like this, say equals new title here, and then I'll put a space, a open parentheses and quote, and I'll say and in order to get the date to work out right, I have to do text and I'm going to say now, open close parentheses, and then I have to give it a format, and so I'll give it a format that most people are okay with. I know you guys don't like the way we Americans do our dates, but so I'll do D space MMM for month space YY, and then end quote. We'll close our parenthesis and say enter. And now, and I needed one more little piece of, no, I want that on the outside of the other parenthesis. So cut that, paste it here. It's fun watching somebody else type formulas, isn't it? So look at there's my new title. And then tomorrow when I reopen this workbook, it'll say the 25th of July. And when you get around to reading this in December, it'll say 24th of December, and you'll remember, oh, I have to go out and buy my wife a present. It works the same way with axis titles. So here's my vertical axis, and I'll come up here, I'll type equals in the formula bar, and click on the vertical axis cell. And I'll do the same thing with the horizontal axis. And what's interesting is you really don't even need to click in the formula bar. If you type equals, you see Excel put the equal sign up in the formula bar, and it's ready for me to click on horizontal axis and enter. And even a shape, as I said, I can click right here and say equals and shape text, enter. Look at that. And to do the labels, it's a little different. I have to select one label at a time. So I've selected all the labels. Now let me just select the one. I'll go click, and you see the one is selected, and you see it's got different handles on the corners. It's got big white ones instead of the smaller gray ones. And so now I'll type equals, and I'll click on the label 1 cell, and I'll say enter. And now the next thing to do, if I want to, I don't have to go and click on that next label. If you use the control key and the arrow keys, you can navigate among the different elements in your chart. So if I use the control key and the right arrow key, it'll go to the next label in that series. So now I've selected that one, and then I type equals, and now all I have to do is move my mouse down one cell to select the next label, and I'll say enter. If I had to click on the label, my mouse would be, it would take about, I don't know, 6 meters of travel to do this chart. But so now I go to the next one, say equals, click, enter, control arrow, equals. So you get into kind of a rhythm here. Enter, control over, equals, click, enter, control arrow, equals, click, and enter. And it's that easy. And like I said, you can have formulas in these cells that will build a label based on something else that's happening in your big fancy financial model. And again, that's a very easy trick. Small multiples. When you are making yourself a dashboard or any kind of report, in this example, see I have some data, and the data is the same, and I want to plot it the same. And so I have company A, B, and C, and I have several years worth of data, target and actual. And I have spent a little bit of time making this chart look just the way I want it to look. And now I want to chart the data for company B and company C. And I have seen people make a default chart and then take, at least as long to make each additional chart look like the first chart. And that's really kind of a real bear. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to just leave this here. Here again is my data, company A. And what I want to do is make copies of the chart. So in order to make a copy of the chart, well, you can select it and do Control C, Control V to paste it, and then you have to move it. But I'll show you a trick here. I'm going to move the chart, and as I move it, if I hold the Control key down, that tells Excel I want to make a copy of that chart, and it will put the copy of the chart where the outline is when I let go of the mouse. If I take the control off, it's only moving the chart, but if I put the control on, it's showing me where the copy of the chart is going to be. If at the same time I hold down the Alt key, the position of that outline sticks to the cell boundaries. And that makes it very easy to line stuff up. So now it's lined up underneath the company B data, and it's perfectly aligned with the company A chart, and I'm going to let go of my mouse, and there it is. And then I'm going to do the same thing over to here for company C. Again, holding Alt and Control, I'm making a copy of the chart that is aligned with the grid lines. Now, if you hold down the equal, I mean not the equal, the shift while you're moving, you can only move the chart vertically or horizontally. And it's not just a chart. This works for any shape that you're dragging along. If you have a slicer you want to line up or whatever. So I'm going to just drop my company C chart right there. It also works like that when you're resizing a chart. If I hold the Alt key down, it will resize only according to the cell boundaries. Or if I hold the Shift key down, if I'm dragging the corner, what it does is it keeps the shape, the aspect ratio, the width to height ratio constant of the chart. So it stretches it without distortion. And if I use the Control key while I'm resizing the chart, what it does is I'm resizing by a corner here. It'll resize the opposite corner in the opposite direction. So the chart is still centered on the same place, but it stretches equally on both sides. Well, I don't need to do that. I'm just going to put myself right back there. There's company C. So now what I did with my title is I linked it to the cell that said company A. So I'm going to link these two to the cells that say company B, and that's in I2. So I'm just going to edit that formula. You can edit these formulas just like any other formula. So I make it I2, and now it says company B, and I'll make this one O2, and it'll oh, that's actually, oh, no, never mind, I did that wrong. O2, and enter. So now that lines up. And now all I need to do is get the data from company B into the chart. So when I click on the chart, you can see that it is still looking at the company A data, but the same way that I could do to increase the number of series in the chart by dragging the highlight that way, I can grab the edge of the highlight, drag it over here, and now I'm looking at the company B data. And I go click, and something broke. All my nice custom formatting got thrown away. And that's another trick I'm going to show you right now. And so let me put the data back so it's still the original thing. There's this funny property that Microsoft has neglected to document, but it's called properties follow chart data point. And what it means is if I apply custom formatting to a chart, so that means like the color fill of the bars or the line color, or if I have data labels on any of the points, any of that custom formatting is linked actually to the cell that has the data for that data point. So the cell right here, this light gray, light blue color is linked to that cell that says 950. And so when I drag it over to this other cell, that cell doesn't have any formatting linked to it, so this all falls apart. And of course, it's confusing. It makes people crazy. You see a lot of people on the forum saying, why did the chart change color? Well, let me show you how you fix that. You go up to your File tab, and you come down here to Options. And then when the Options dialog comes up, you click on Advanced, and you scroll about halfway down until you come to Charts. I think I went too far. And you see there's one that says Properties Follow Chart Data Point for all new workbooks. I usually leave that one alone. But if I'm playing with charts in my workbook, what I have to do is uncheck Properties Follow Chart Data Point for current workbook. And what that means is then the properties follow the chart, not the data point. not the data underlying the chart. And of course, usually when I'm done, I'll come back and I'll check it again, because I'm always afraid that maybe there's some other property that I'm relying on that if I uncheck this is going to break. So, you know, that's the problem with the way they've documented it. So I'll say okay, and now that that's set, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to grab the data highlights and drop it on top of the company B data. And you see, that time it updated and the format stayed the way I like them. And then now I'll do the same thing for company C. And let me take that and drag it across. And there we go. And my charts all have the same formatting. They're all nicely lined up. This is the kind of report that you can give to your boss, and he'd be proud to send it to his boss. With one exception. See, I have all my data here, but the axes don't all line up. The first one goes from 0 to 1600. The next one goes from 0 to 1400. And then the last one doesn't even start at 0. It goes from 950 up to 1350. And I want those to all be the same, because otherwise it's hard to compare them. And I could come in here and go up to axis options and change the maximum here to 1500, and then come over here and change my minimum and maximum. But then what happens if, oh, I don't know, say I change the data, so instead of 2013 to 2017, I'm now charting 2014 to 2018, or maybe I'm finally coming up to 2020, and the numbers might not fit within the axes that I've hard-coded minimum and maximum. What I'm going to show you next is a little trick that uses the actual data to give yourself uniform axis scales across all your charts. And this is how I'm going to do it. I'm going to, again, add a series to each of these charts that will have the right data, and then hide those series so that nobody knows the magic that I used. So how do I do that? Over here, I have this little range of data, which is going to be an added series for all these charts. And so I put my minimum and maximum values that I want to use. And minimum, I could say equals min and do all those things, but I want my minimum to be 0 because of this little guy down here. It's not a good idea if you have a bar chart to not start at 0. If you start higher than 0, the bars are going to be truncated and people are going to look at it and their eyes are going to tell them a different story than the numbers are telling. So I'll say 0. And for maximum, I'm just going to use a simple formula equals max. And I'm going to select all the data that might possibly be the maximum of my whole data set. So D4 to E8, comma, and then the company B data, and then the company C data. And I say enter, and that's the maximum value. So now if every chart has that value of 1425 in there, when it calculates the axis, it's going to make the axis, it's going to use the same auto scale algorithm with the same auto scale input data to get the same output scaled axis. So I'm going to select this data range. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to select my chart, and I'm going to come here to paste. And I'm not going to just paste. I'm going to come to paste special, because sometimes Excel guesses wrong about my intentions. So what I'm going to do is add cells as new series. That's correct. Series names in first row. Yes, dummy is a series name. Categories in first column. Min, max. Yeah, it's not even going to use those categories, but those are the categories that are in my data. So I'm just going to say that's okay, and I'll go okay. And you see, now I have a new series that goes from 0 down here to 1425 up here. And now the data is still copied, so I'm going to click on the next chart and I'm going to go paste special. If Excel guessed the first time, it probably guessed right here. So I'm just going to say okay. And you see there it is, and you see now the data moved down a little bit because it moved the axis up a little bit. And now this is company C is going to have the biggest change. I'll go to paste special and I'll say okay, and there you go. And so now all we have to do is take these added series. In fact, you can't do it quite yet because as long as the Excel is still in copy mode, you can't format that series. It's just going to not work. So you just hit escape key to undo the copy. And now I can come over here and I'll come to the format data series and I'll make it no line, and I'll format it to have no marker. And then I come over here and I do that again. I'll do no marker, and I'll do no line. And then a lot of things in Excel, if you hit F4, it repeats the last action. Some formatting stuff in charts, it does repeat the last action. It doesn't repeat changing the marker, but it does repeat changing the line color. So I'll hit F4 to change that line color, and then I'll come back over here and do the no marker thing again. And there you go. All the charts are nicely lined up. The axes are perfect. Everything's great about this. Well, we do have one problem. We have this extra series in the legend, but that's easy to fix, as I showed before. One click to select the legend, another click to select the legend entry, and then you hit delete. And then you repeat that with your other legends, and we see repeat. So click, click, delete. Now they're perfect. There's another neat trick you can do with charts. If I have a bunch of data, and here the way I've shown it is 2016 Q1, 2016 Q2, and so forth. If I put that into my chart just with the year and quarter in every slot, that axis gets very cluttered, and it probably gets rotated. So you gotta twist your neck to read the labels and so forth, and it just is kind of messy. But if what you do, I have this data here, and I use one column for the year and one column for the quarter, but I only put the year next to Q1, and I leave the other cells blank. I only put the year next to Q1, and I leave the other quarter cells blank, and so forth down the left line. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select that data. Actually, you can just select one cell in the data, and Excel is pretty good at figuring out what you want to do. And I'm going to come over here and I'm going to insert a line chart. And I'm just going to, and here's with my trick with the Alt key to line it up. And you see now where I have 2016 and 4 quarters, that 2016 is centered underneath the 4 quarters in the label, in the axis tick labels. And then 2017 is centered over there, and 2018 under there. And now for 2020, I only have the first 2 quarters so far, so that's only centered below those 2, but it's still perfect. I kind of wish they used a slightly darker color for the axis labels. So you see there, it shows up a little bit better. But that's a much easier way to display the data. It's easier. People can just look and they say, oh, here's 2016, this whole thing, that you don't have to read each little label, and you don't have to work so hard. And that's the thing. You want to reduce people's cognitive load so they can understand the meaning of your chart, not so they have to spend all this time interpreting the elements of the chart. And you see, I did this here with 2 different levels, but you can do it with more than that. In this data set, I have year, quarter, and month. And so if I make a chart with that data, and let me come over here to insert line chart. I'll do line chart with markers. I prefer line charts with markers than line charts without markers, because if there's a marker there, then I know there's a data point there. If for example, I had a couple of missing data points here and I just had a line going there, I wouldn't even know that if I didn't have the line with markers option. I'm a little funny that way, but that's me. But anyway, so let me just darken that line up slightly, and I like to go to this next to the bottom one in the first column. And it's nice to have light lines that don't blast your retinas. But so now you see I have my Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, each centered under the 3 months of the quarter, and the year is centered under the quarters of the year. And even with 3 layers, that's not too complicated. I've worked with a a client who had a need to have 5 different layers here. And of course, he had big charts, so it didn't take up the whole height of the chart. And it actually worked, and it was a good job. Now, you can look at this and say, well, that's a little bit spaced out. And there's a setting here under labels where you can put them a little closer together. Distance from axis. That's kind of a spacing thing. And you can enter any number between 0 and 1,000, and the default is 100. And for this case, I'm just going to change it to 0, and it's going to tighten that up a little bit, and it looks great. So now the problem with that is, you know, I just made this nice chart, and I've got my quarters and my years, and I have a nice line in between the years down on the axis labels. And what I would like to do is have a vertical grid line for that, you know, for each of those lines, extending them up. But when you go to Excel and you go to the thing here to add a chart, to add your grid lines, if I just click major vertical, it puts one between every single individual small layer. And you know, I would think that that's kind of the minor grid lines, and the major one would be the big one here, but that's not the way it works. I would like to get this effect, but that's not something that's built into Excel. But again, you know, like I say, you can always add stuff to a chart. A little aside here, I first started charting with computers way back in the mid 1980s. I hate to admit how old that makes me. And we had this little desktop computer. It was, you know, probably the same footprint as a modern laptop, but it was a lot thicker. It had about, I don't know, 50 megs of RAM. I mean, not 50 megs. It had less than a meg of RAM memory. So, you know, it was old. It was way back. But it was connected to an HP plotter, one of those ones with a pen, and there'd be a little carousel, and the little thing would go over and grab a pen, you know, grab the red pen, and it would go and put the pen down, move to draw a line, pick the pen up, and then go and get a different color and draw the next line. And you know, that was using what they called HP Basic, a version that looks not too different from VBA actually. And if you wanted a line, you would essentially write HP Basic that said, grab the red pen, go to that position, put the pen down, go to that other position, pick the pen up, and you built your whole chart this way. And so that's kind of what I do with Excel. And I don't tell it to go grab the red pen, but what I do is tell it I want a line to start down here and to go up there. And so what I'm going to do right here is show you how I did that. And so here is the same data and the same chart, and I have some data over here that says grid. And what I've done is set it up so that, well, on a line chart like this or a column chart, each of your tick marks is at a certain spot on the axis. So this first one is at spot 1, and that one's at spot 2, and that's at spot 3 and 4 and so on. And really where I want my line to be is at, not at 1, and 0 is on the other side of the vertical axis. So that's really 1.5, and that's 1.5, 2.5, 3.5, 4.5. That's the next one on my list, 8.5. So what I'm going to do is add this data to my chart, and it's going to add it as another line with markers, and I'm going to change it to an XY scatter chart with markers, and it'll put those markers at those points on the line chart. So again, copy the data, select the chart, paste special as new series. Series name is first row, series labels and category labels in first column. Okay, so here they are, and they're not lined up right because that's still a line chart series, and every line chart series in the chart uses the same X values as the first series, even if the series formula has different X values in there. So now I hit exit, escape to undo the copy, and I'll select my series and I'll right click on it. And that's funny, that didn't work. And I'll right click on it and I'll change series chart type. And the grid, I want it to be not line with markers, but I want the scatter with markers, and markers only, because if I had a line, I would have to delete the line later. And then when you add a scatter series to a line chart, Excel thinks you want to put it on the secondary axis. And sometimes you do, and sometimes you don't. So here I'm going to uncheck the secondary axis. And you see now in a little preview, those little orange dots are lined up right with the little tick marks, the extended tick marks in my axis. And so here I am. And now I need to get a vertical line. So what am I going to use for my vertical line? I'm going to come over here and I'm going to say error bars, and I'm going to go to more options. And what this does is it, for my vertical error bar, I want my vertical error bar to only go in the plus direction. I want it to have a value. See, it goes from 0 to 7,000. I want it to go up to 7,000. And I don't want it to have a cap at the end. You see, error bars are kind of T-shaped. They have a cap at the end. So I don't want the cap. And so that's good. And then what I want to do is select the horizontal error bars. And I'll delete them because I don't need those. All I need is the vertical lines. Well, now, of course, they don't go all the way to the top. So I'm going to click on that and make my axis option. I'm going to hard code my axis maximum, which I don't like hard coding all the time, but you know, that's okay. And then I'll hide those markers, and it's our secret how I made those lines show up. Then of course we should also make them match the tick marks, because they're a black line and the tick marks are a gray line. Now it's perfect. So now of course what I could have done here instead, and let me see if I can do it quickly without causing too much trouble. If I right click on that and again, I'm going to change series chart type, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep it on the secondary axis and say OK. And now, when I did that, Excel didn't mess up the horizontal alignment. And so what I'm going to do is come back to my original vertical axis, and I'm going to take away the hard-coded maximum. And what I'm going to do is my secondary vertical axis, I am going to hard code that one. And I don't even really need to use 7,000. You know what I'm going to use? I'm going to use 1 over here. And I'm going to change my error bar height to 1. So instead of a fixed value of 7,000, I'm going to use a fixed value of 1. And then since this axis is hard-coded, and I'm going to hard-code it to 0 to 1, now I'm going to hide this axis. Those error bars never need to change their length anymore. So I'll hide those axes by going to, not tick marks, but to my labels. And instead of next to axis, I'm going to say none, hide those. And now, since those error bars go from 0 to 1 on the secondary axis, this data here can go to whatever it wants on the primary vertical axis. And if it wants to auto scale, I don't have to go back and rescale anything else. So there's my trick. That's how you get grid lines where Excel didn't want to put them. I'm going to do some conditional formatting here. You see I have some monthly data here, and I've already done conditional formatting in the worksheet using this dialog here, so that I've highlighted the minimum with an orange color and the maximum with a blue color, and I'd like to do that in my chart. And of course, you could come over here. I can select the whole series and then click again to select just one bar, and I can come over and format just the one bar, and I can change the fill color. And then I can do the same thing for the maximum. But the problem with that is, again, if the data changes, then my colors are not dynamic, and I'll have to come and I'll have to change the one that's no longer minimum back to gray and find the new minimum and change that to orange and find the new maximum and change that to blue. And that just takes, oh, it'll spoil your whole day updating stuff like that. But again, like I did with the moving labels, I'm going to add some data here. And what I'm going to do is add a minimum series that only has a bar where the minimum is, and a maximum series that only has a bar where the maximum is. So the formula is going to look like that, equals if, and if this here equals the min of the whole column, and let me use my F4 key to lock in that. So if it equals that, I'm going to use the value in C3. Otherwise, I'm going to use my NA. And see, look, I have only one value, and that's where the minimum is. And for max, the same thing, is equals if this cell equals the max of the whole, oops, the max of the whole column, F4, then use that cell's value, otherwise use NA. Control Enter, and now you see I have a maximum value right here. So we click on the chart and we grab one of our handles and we drag it over, and now you see what it's already done. Apparently I didn't set this chart back to the way it was in its virgin state. So let me go and do that quietly, you know, talk amongst yourselves here. We're going to use an overlap of 0 to start with, which is sort of what the default is. So now I'll come back here and I'll extend my data. Oh, now I have to select the whole chart so I can drag that to include more data. And you see I have an extra bar here, which is orange, which matches this orange here. And that makes sense because that's the second color in the color scheme. You know, if you format, the first color is blue, the second color is orange, the third color is gray. Well, this is the second series now, so it's orange. And then you see over here, I have another bar which says max, and that one is the one that I want to be blue. So let me come back and color that blue. And then now I've added those bars, but I want them to be in front of the gray bars. So I'll go back and change my overlap to 100. And there we have our nice conditionally formatted chart. And if the data changes, like suppose a different value becomes the minimum, look at that, a different bar gets the color. If I have another bar becomes a new maximum. In fact, what if I have two that are the same maximum? Now they're both colored that way because they both equal the maximum. And it happens dynamically in the chart now without any intervention on my part. I didn't need to use any VBA coding. It's just a little trick with a hidden series. And here it is worked out for you. I've even put data labels on there for you. And then now conditionally formatted lines. It's a similar thing. You see, I already have the formula in here. In fact, the formula I added, there's not even formulas. I just hard coded those. I don't know why I did that. So we need to use the same formulas as in the previous example. And so it's like if this cell equals the minimum of the whole column, of the whole data set, F4, comma, C3, comma, NA, control. And it's no magic here, it's just formulas, equals if the cell equals max of the whole range, and F4 and C3, comma, NA open close parens. There we go. And so now I'm going to just take this little highlight and I'm going to drag it over. And I've now added 2 new series to my chart. Again, you can see the orange one here for min. And what I'm going to do is format that. What I'm going to do, first of all, is make sure there's no line, because if I have a line there and I do have 2 minimum values across the chart, they're going to be connected with a line, and we don't want that to happen. So I'm going to change it to no line, and then the marker, I'm going to make it a little fancier. What I'm going to do is use no fill, and I'm going to keep the orange color, but I'm going to make it a thicker border. And then what I'm going to do is increase the size of that. So this is actually going to be drawing a circle around the point that it is highlighting. And now we have to find the maximum series, and I could figure out, oh, it's the next to the last one, and go over and click on it. But because I have the minimum series highlighted, I told you before I can use the control and the arrow keys. So I can use the control up arrow key to select min. If I did control down, I would select my monthly data, but then I select my min and I select my max, and now I can format this one the same way I did the previous one. So we're going to use the built-in circle, and I don't know, is that the right size? We'll see in a minute. No fill. Yeah, it looks like the right size, because then the border, well, let's make it blue, and let's go and give it a little thickness here. And that looks pretty good. And now what we want to do is say something about those points. So I'm going to select my minimum series, and I'm going to come over here, click that little plus sign, and I'm going to add data labels. And let's put the data label below. It's the min, so it's low. And then I'll do the same thing for my max. I'm going to select that, add data label above, and now we just need to format the data labels. So I come over here to label options, and I'm going to use series name, and I'm going to not use value or leader lines. And for the max, I'm going to do the same thing, series name max, there it is, and take away value and leader lines. And a little formatting, make that blue and make it bold, and make that bold, control B, and make it orange. And there we go. And you know what, let's make them stick out a little bit better. And so that's how you can highlight your minimum and maximum in a line chart very easily. So now I have a couple more examples. A lot of times you might have 2 sets of data, they're timeline data, and you want to put them on the same chart, but they don't use the same scale. For example, my blue data range here has weekly data, 1st of the January, 8th to 15th. So these are spaced weekly. And this set of data, there's one on the 15th of the month and there's one on the end of the month. And so if I plot just the one, that looks great. And it goes from, January through May, whatever. And I plot the second one and that looks great. It goes from January to May, not the same first day and not the same last day, but you get the idea. And if I go and add my series, so let's go through the motions of adding this. So what I'm going to do, hang on a moment, my screen is going funny on me. I have the night light turned on, so it's less blue light at night. It's supposed to help me sleep better. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to copy my added data, and I'm going to paste special onto the chart, and it's done it right a few times in a row here, so I'm going to get lazy one of these times and paste the data on, and then it will be wrong, and I'll have to use my favorite Excel shortcut, Control Z, to go back and undo it. But I'll add that, and when I add that data to the chart, even though the dates are different here, it plots them using the same dates that the first series does, and that's just the way line charts work in Excel. And what I can do, of course, is to get around that is then I right click on here, I go to change series chart type, and I don't change the chart type, but I move it to the secondary axis. and that didn't help yet. It's still way offset, but I can come here, click on axes, and add a secondary horizontal axis, and now it almost lines up. And then what I need to do is I need to format my axes so that they have the same starting point and the same ending point. So let's say I want to do 1 on 2017. It doesn't let me override that to say it's, well, let me see if I do 1, 2, and then change it back to 1, 1. What I want to do is make it not be automatic. And I want this to be, let's say, 6, 1, 2017. And then what I have to do is scale that one so it's the same way. And it's 1, 1, 2017, and it's 6, 1, 2017. For those of you not in the US, that really means 1, 6, 2017. And so this is the way they're supposed to work. But what I had to do was put them on the, and then I don't need both vertical axes. I can delete one, and then they'll both be plotted against those values. But see, then what I had to do was add the second axis, and then now I'm always going to have to be coming back to this chart and changing the both axis scales to make sure they line up. And it either clutters the chart, or I have to hide this one, and then I have to remember that it's there hidden to go back and fix it later. And it's just, oh, it's just miserable. And, you know, we're not going to do it that way. What I'm going to do, and this takes advantage of the way Excel's line charts work, is I'm going to, you know, I'm even going to get rid of that. I'm just going to do it right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take, well, let me take those dates. I'm going to just stick them at the bottom over here. They're not in order. They're out of order. I don't care. And then I'm going to take these values here, and I'm going to put my series name over there, and I'm going to take my other values, and I'm going to drag them down here, and then we can get rid of that because we don't care about that. But now you can still see that the data is from 1 and 2, the separate data sets. But I'm going to select that whole range, and now I'm going to insert a line chart, and I'm going to insert a line chart with markers. And so we see that the points do line up appropriately, just like they did over in this chart here, or over in the one that I was playing with. And the only problem is that well, we see from the legend they're supposed to be line and marker. I don't see any orange lines, and I see that the blue line is intermittent. There's some gaps in there. And of course, the reason for that is what happens when Excel has a line chart with a date axis. It does it with a date axis. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy the data over here. So I pasted the data in, and let me double click on that. So here's my dates, and they go in order up to here, and then they go in a new order down here. I'm going to sort this range by those dates, sort oldest to newest. And you see now what I have is here they are sorted in order. What the line chart does is I'll give it data that's out of order. It sorts the data internally before it plots it. So you see wherever I have empty cells in my sorted data, there's going to be a gap between the points. There's an empty cell here, so there's a gap between those 2 points, and there's an empty cell here, so there's a gap. And so that's just because by default Excel puts a gap wherever you have missing data. And that's something that we can get around very easily. I can right click on my chart. I can go to select data. The select data is also up in the chart design tab. But I right click as much as I can. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to click over here to hidden and empty cells. These are empty cells, right? So what I want to do with empty cells is connect the data points with a line so that it doesn't care if there's an empty cell. And I'm going to say okay, and I'm going to say okay. And here's my data. I didn't need to mess with secondary axes or anything else. The data lines up, even though the time scales use a different date sequence. I just faked out Excel, and I didn't have to sort my original data. It automatically sorts it internally, and there's my chart. This example, I saw it on Minda Tracy's blog very recently. It's the blog is My Online Training Hub. She does a lot of Excel training. She does a lot of Power Query training, a lot of that kind of stuff. She has great training courses. She's a friend and colleague of mine, and I don't think she'd mind that I stole her example because I could have written this myself, but she beat me to it. But anyway, so long story short, so I have data here, and it's regularly spaced data. And what I'd kind of like to do is, instead of my axis being, so normal as this with a label on the first of every month, I would like to put the date of each data point on the axis. And maybe I'd like to put a little marker there to indicate that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add myself another series to my chart. I'm going to put the label axis here, and I'm going to say 0. So my y values for this series is going to be 0. So those points are all going to be right along the bottom. And what I'm going to do is add that to my chart, and I just grab that and move it over. And see, now I have a point along the axis corresponding to each point on the chart. And so let's do a little formatting here. I'm going to first of all add data labels below the points. I'm going to select the actual axis here, and I'm going to change my number format to something custom, but I'm going to make it something like with a quote and a couple of spaces and a quote, and I'll add it. And what that does, if I just hid the axis labels, it would have moved the axis down, and I would have had to play with the height of the plot area and everything else. But that means I don't have to do that. Actually, it doesn't necessarily mean that, because we'll see. But so now my labels, they all say 0 because the default labels say what the value is. And I'll come back over here to label options, and I'll show not series names, but category name, which is the date. I'll get rid of value. I'll get rid of leader lines. And they're a little cluttered here. So what I'm going to have to do, which I don't always like to do, but let's change the alignment there. I can just rotate the text this way. So now I'm going to have to play with that anyway. So the trick I did with the quote space quote for the number format was extraneous. But what I'm going to do now, I'll format that series, trying to select the series and not the axis. So I'll format it so there's no line, and I'll use a different marker. I'll use the built-in, the plus sign. So that's going to look like an axis tick that crosses the axis. And let me find, I don't want them to be orange though. I'll use a color like this, light medium gray, and it's a little bit darker than the axis line. So I'll use the same for the axis line. And now, so there's my tick marks on the axis, and a label for each point in my data. And so at this point, that's the last example I had for you, and I'll let Liam take it away.
Thank you very much, John. Look, we've got a few questions here. We're a little bit over the hour mark, but it doesn't matter when it's a recorded video. So I'm just going to take the advantage just before you disappear, if that's all right. The first question we've got is you showed in the Excel options, the advanced section, the properties follow chart data point for current workbook. Does that work for pivot tables as well?
For pivot charts, I guess.
Sorry, yes, pivot charts.
As far as I know, and I've looked into this, I don't believe that it works for pivot charts. Pivot charts keep track of data a little differently because of the way the filters are worked out and everything else. And as far as I recall, and if I'm wrong, I hope somebody tells me and I'll slap myself. But as far as I know, that does not help with pivot charts. If your pivot table isn't going to be changing its dimensions, you can always make a regular chart from the pivot table data by making a chart that links to no data, and then you add the data series by series to the pivot chart. And the reason it has to be a pivot table that doesn't change its dimensions is because the chart will not know that the dimensions have changed, and it won't be charting all the right data anymore.
Understood. Thank you very much. You also showed before about the distance from axis settings. Is there a similar one for data labels?
Oh, no, there's not. And we've asked about it. We've requested it. And, you know, it'd be nice to have a little bit more control over how far away from your data points your labels are. To me, they're too far away. Especially if you have a lot of points, sometimes a label looks like it's closer to a different point. So we have asked Microsoft for it. I think it's in their list of requests for new chart features, but it's, you know, it's still waiting.
Thank you very much. I think we've got time just for one more question here. It's asked, just a general question. Any tips for creating charts for the visually impaired or the colorblind?
I can address color vision deficiency. I meant to mention before when I was doing my conditional formatting of lines and bars, and here I have used blue for maximum and orange for minimum. And the reason for that isn't just that I like blue and orange. It's, you know, and most people would think, oh, you'd use green for the best and red for the worst, and you know, the whole traffic, the stoplight color analogy. But the problem is something like you know, several percent of the male population has difficulty distinguishing red and green from each other. And in the data visualization community, there's been a push to go towards using different colors. And for example, the blue for positive and the orange for negative has been slowly making its way through the data viz community. And in fact, if you look at the default colors, the first accent color is blue and the second one is orange, just so they're easy to get to for this kind of purpose. There are websites you can go to. You can send a screenshot and they will simulate what your screenshot would look like to somebody with certain types of vision deficiencies. I don't have the names of any of them off the top of my head, but Google can let you know quicker than I could anyway. In terms of accessibility, I actually was reading an article this morning. It's funny you happen to bring this up, and they're talking about using alt tabs for charts. And this, of course, means a chart that you're uploading to the web, and there's always an alt tab for an image, which appears in case for some reason the image didn't load right, or a lot of screen readers that visually impaired people use to read content off their screen will read the alt tab. And they suggest doing something systematic with your alt tabs for a chart. And it would say, for example, the alt tab for this chart would say bar chart showing monthly sales and highlighting minimum in June and maximum in November and February, something like that, so that the alt tab, the alt text gives a better description to whoever is trying to, you know, consume your data than just chart or than just no alt text at all. So
thank you very much, John. Look, I think we've taken enough of your time there. That's been great. If anyone's got any more questions for John, feel free to email him directly, or
yes,
check out his website, peltiertech.com. It's a great website. I've got to be honest, many years before I was an MVP, I was stealing all the stuff from there. No, I wasn't writing the blogs up about it afterwards. I did notice though, John, once you and I have written exactly the same example. I remember we were at an Excel conference and we were talking about plagiarism, and then I noticed noticed that you and I had both written it, and we couldn't figure out who'd written it first. But I swear to you, I didn't copy you. And I'm sure you think, who's Liam Bastick? He's no idea.
Yeah, right.
So,
Well, we might have lifted it from the same third party.
Yeah, we stole it from somebody else. Jon Peltier, it's been a delight. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Liam.
We'll end the recording there. Thank you.